Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, Serving Students with Disabilities During Periods of Remote or Blended Learning. Today's technical assistance session is the first in a series. We're going to be focused on balancing LEA discretion and flexibility and doing that balancing act using some data tools that we have provided for you. I'm Jennifer Carpenter. I'm a professional development specialist for OSSI. My work focuses on special education. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's test drive a couple of things really quickly. Could you please look in the participant box and click the green check if you can hear me? Yay. Folks are hearing me. Good news. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Before we get started, I want to give a big shout out to Kelly Scholl. She is a data analysis manager for OSSI, and she created the data tools that we are going to use today. We have been working together for many months on a strategic priority around improving outcomes for students with disabilities, and so we knew we were on the same page about the values behind the resources we wanted to make, but Kelly was an excellent partner in getting this done and getting it done quickly. So she can't be here today. She has a conflict, but I wanted to make sure that I give credit where credit is due, and a big shout out again to Kelly, who really made this possible with the technology. Because, yeah, and I, of course, brought the practitioner lens. So teamwork makes the dream work. So there's some disclaimers we're going to start off with right away. Nobody is an expert in what we're trying to accomplish right now. The purpose of the session is not to provide you with hard and fast answers, but to provide a place for us to seek potential solutions together. So to make the most out of the webinar, you're going to need, let's see if I can get everything open that you're going to need. You're going to need the toolkit. So if you just, it was attached to the email and also attached to this webinar when you logged in. So here's the toolkit. So when I'm referring to the toolkit, that's what I'm talking about. It's sort of the guidebook. You're going to need the PDF of the forms. So there is a PDF version of some really cool Google forms I'm going to show you today. You should be able to see that now. Hey, Chris, can you hit your green check if you see the PDF of the forms? No pressure. Okay. So we should be looking right now at just a big stack of PDFs, and we're going to be looking at these today. And it's easiest if you follow along when we're looking at the forms with the PDF, because if you try to go down the rabbit hole of all of the Google forms and the Google Sheets and the Google documents, it's going to be a lot and very confusing. Finally, in the invitation for today, you got a link to our virtual chart paper. If you opened up the chart paper, you should find something like this. And I see a lot of anonymous critters here, so I think you must have found it. But just in case you didn't, I'm going to drop it in the chat for you right now. So link to our virtual chart paper is in the chat box. I'm going to hang out here for 1 second, see how, see, it's working. We got lots of anonymous animals now. Okay, so that's what you're going to need right now. We'll be opening some other things and looking at some other things as we go through. There are a lot of moving pieces, so I ask you to be patient, but the reason there's a lot of moving pieces is because we have a lot of needs for support right now. So I'll do my best to make it as clear as I can. You can find all of the resources in the invitation, as I said, to the webinar. There are additional resources that I will send your way shortly by way of a link to a web page where all of this information is housed on OSSI's website. Later on, I will share that page with you. Heads up on attendance. So I'm going to drop a survey into the chat box at the end of the webinar. You need to complete the survey because it's going to be used to track attendance, assign PLEs, and inform future offerings. Okay, so make sure that you're hanging around and that you grab that survey link out of the chat box at the end. All right, moving on. So This is just part one, as I said, in a whole series. We're going to be together, I hope, for the next 2 Wednesdays from 1:30 to 3 o'clock. I hope you'll join me for the whole time. These are deep dive sessions that we're going to help you to get to know tools we shared in a webinar on May 20th. If you did not get to check out that webinar, don't worry. We have a recording of it on our website, and I'll share that link with you later. We're going to use these deep dives to explore how the tools that we've created can work together to enhance your programming, engagement, and data collection in your LEA, not just in remote and blended learning environments, but also when we're back in brick and mortar schools eventually. So today kicks off the first of these 3 TA sessions. As we go through all of these sessions, I'm going to encourage you to use the chat or the Q&A feature to ask questions about the tools and the content as they come up. If I don't get to your question right away, don't worry. I'm going to be pausing to read and respond to questions and comments as we go through. If there's something that you ask and I don't get to today, don't worry. I will download all of this, and then Kelly and I will sit down together and make sure that we respond to your questions soon. Okay, so there we go. So our goal today is to talk about flexible and creative ways that we can deliver a wide variety of services via distance learning. And we're going to be focused really on engaging families in a lot of ways, but specifically in consideration of flexible options for delivering services. We're going to get some examples of how LEAs can determine and address each family's level of access and needs for support, and possible solutions to address gaps that you may identify in access to technology or readiness for families' readiness to partner for service delivery. So we're going to be thinking through all of that today. So we are currently in this space where we're talking about special education. When we all went to remote learning, right, or distance learning, special educators had to be first to solve problems because we have, of course, instructional concerns and safety concerns about students like everyone does, but we also have another set of concerns around compliance and legal ramifications and financial ramifications around whether or not we are providing students with everything that they need, and we're doing our very best to do so. And so we were straight out of the gate doing some problem solving here, as you were all, I'm sure. But I just want to point out that even though this was built to solve problems and address gaps, for students with disabilities, this is useful beyond special education service provision and documentation. Really what Kelly has built is a free MTSS data dashboard. So when I start opening this up and you're looking at it, I want you to keep in mind that it's all right now framed collecting, analyzing, using data regarding students with disabilities, but it does not have to be, and it is built to help you take in data from across a wide group of students and identify trends that you would need to be able to identify to tier support. So please keep that in mind as we go through. Before we get started, though, we're going to ground ourselves in some key principles that are the foundation of our service to students with disabilities and their families. All right. So way back in March, some of you may have attended a webinar on PCSD that Victoria Glick and I led, introducing some and reviewing some key principles of special education service provision. The tools that we created are all aligned to the principles, so we're going to ground our discussion there. I just want to make one big point, and that is that this slide does not say key principles of special education service provision during remote learning or post-COVID. These principles were foundational before, and they are especially important now when there is a lack of face-to-face interaction with your colleagues, your students, the families in your school community, and all of this complicates service provision, assessment, communication, documentation, the list can go on and on. I'm going to ask you guys to pause for just 1 second while getting email from folks in this group. So if you have any questions that come up during this, please put them in the Q&A or the chat. Just one sec, guys. Okay, sorry about that. Make sure everybody can get in. All right, so here's the key principles I was just referring to. Key principles of special education service provision. So before we discuss them in any detail at all, I just want to point out that these key principles are founded in guidance provided by the U.S. Department of Education and OSSE. So the guidance that these are founded in are linked throughout the toolkit. We really encourage you to review the documents that are linked throughout the toolkit because they should be guiding your decision making and serving as a foundation for transparent discussions with families as you navigate this situation and as you plan for reentry. So think about finding some time, if you're a special education leader, to discuss with your school leader your obligations under IDEA and OSSE regulations in this specific context if you have not already. So 3 key principles. Oh, I have a question from Heather. Are these things going to be made available later? Yes, Heather, they will be made available later. You will get, the recording will be up and online, and you will also get all the materials and a big follow-up email that will come at the end of the series. All right. Key principles of special education service provision are LEA discretion and flexibility. We're going to discuss this in more detail, but IDEA provides for flexibility as long as you're partnering with parents. Okay? So you need to really dig into the idea that you have the ability to be flexible, even though we don't always embrace that flexibility here in DC. We'll get into that more later. Another key principle is transparent communications with students and families. You're going to have to work with students and families to identify solutions for barriers to service delivery, to assessment, instruction, also documenting team decisions and providing documentation to families. And we're going to go beyond that today in our discussion. And then finally, data-driven efforts to address students' needs. Data-driven efforts means that they're student-specific efforts and that you'll need all of the data that we are going to be providing you with ways to collect today to consider receipt of educational benefit. So please, as we're going through this, remember, and I will say this to you at the end, but I'm going to say it now just to frame that it's a lot. I'm going to share with you a lot of different tools, and it's going to be a little overwhelming. You'll be able to take your time and use some of the resources we've given you to really dig in and see what's possible here. But always keep at the front of your mind that these tools are designed to do 2 things. Meet students' actual needs as people, right? Not just students with IEPs, but students, period, so that you are able to address their needs, their instructional academic needs, their social emotional needs, and identify areas for concern where the school may need to reach out to the family to see what support needs to be provided. The same tools that you can use to do a better job of teaching students remotely or in blended context are tools that will prepare you to have data-driven, evidence-based conversations about receipt of educational benefit at the end of the recovery period. Please give me the green check if you know what I'm saying. Awesome. Somebody gave me a thumbs up. You know how I know somebody gave me a thumbs up? Because it makes a beep in my ear. Now I got to find this person that made the beep. Okay. Oh, put their hand back down. Okay. Well, I'm glad to say that you guys understand that this is not just useful as an instructional, to support instruction and supporting students social emotionally during this very traumatic and transition-rich period, but also that it's going to prepare you for conversations that you will be having with families later. All right, so the 3 key principles. Today we're going to be focused on the first one, balancing discretion and flexibility. So IDEA allows for the flexibility required to generate solutions to new contexts. So we are definitely in a new context now, right? Back in March, DOE recognized, the Department of Ed, that the determination of how safe is to be provided may have to be different during an unprecedented national emergency. So they acknowledge, like, things may be different now. They're reminding you, too, that you do have flexibility when circumstances change. So while you have flexibility, you are required to ensure that the policies and procedures you establish are consistent with IDEA requirements and that you continue to partner with parents. We'll be focused on those 2 things today. All right. These are just some citations to remind you that these things that I'm saying today, of course, they're just common sense, but they're also founded in these guidance documents, both federal and local. So, as I said, IDEA has allows for some flexibility because we're in a novel situation and we need novel solutions. And you do, I will remind you, enjoy broad discretion as long as you're consistent with IDEA. Given the history and the legal context of the DC education landscape, special education landscape, we do not always employ flexibility or feel comfortable doing so in the way that IDEA would allow us to do. But we're hoping that we can share with you some ways today that you can do that while partnering with families and while ensuring that you are making data-driven decisions that you that are evidence-based and that are defensible. Okay. So, as always, you got to partner with parents. As a general principle, we are encouraged to work with parents to reach mutually agreeable extensions of time as appropriate, right? To do other things like arrange service hours and formats, to make adjustments to accommodations. We'll discuss all of those things today. But as we do that, we have to remember that parents are our co-teachers now. They've always been our partners, but now when it comes to direct instruction and service provision, we rely on them. This does not mean that we are placing the burden to provide instruction and services to students on their families, but that we have to recognize that deep and ongoing collaboration between families and school staff will be necessary if we're going to mitigate regression and promote recovery and eventually help students make progress. Finally, you have to ensure team decisions are based on data that describe the circumstances of the individual student. So, although you will eventually be faced with the prospect of reworking a lot of IEPs and rethinking them because the students are living in new circumstances, that has to be done on a case-by-case basis. Okay, so the I in IEP stands for individualized, and you need data to be able to make that happen. Making decisions on a case-by-case basis requires a strong system is in place for collecting student-level data, because the incidental and formal opportunities to gather information about student access and progress are not as numerous right now. You are really going to have to be able to point to data that you've collected to be the foundations of the decisions that you would like to make with the IEP team and the proposals that you are going to pose. Just a reminder that an IEP is an instrument of continuous improvement, and the tools we discuss today are designed to be instruments of continuous improvement. So to collect student-level data and family input so that you can continually improve individual IEPs but also you can collect caseload level, school level, LEA level data that will support your own efforts at continuously improving your response to this public emergency and your response to the shifting educational context that we are all facing right now. We hope that the tools we're going to discuss next are going to support you to maintain consistency with IDEA requirements by helping you to develop protocols and procedures that are based on student-level data and family input, that are designed to help you continue to collect that input so that continuous improvement of individual plans is possible, and also to help you document service provision and team decisions in a meaningful way. So as you work to balance LEA's discretion and flexibility with IDEA's requirements in these changing circumstances, you're going to need to find new ways to collaborate with families and provide students with individualized support. In the introductory webinar, we shared 3 examples of solutions to challenges. They're here, posed by working remotely with families to develop these flexible, creative, individualized approaches. Each of the potential solutions has been paired with a tool or more than one tool that you can use as is, you can tweak to meet your needs, or you can use it just as a starting point for developing or enhancing your own resources, okay? So we're going to discuss these 3 solutions using data to identify needs for service provision or supports for service provision, clearly communicating barriers to families, and working with families to leverage existing resources to identify solutions. Just a reminder that if you haven't attempted to access the tools already, you've been provided in the toolkit with links to the tools. When you click the link, you're going to be invited to make a copy of each tool. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, of course, we don't want everyone going in and editing all on the same tool. And the second reason is, once you've made a copy of the tool, it's yours to adapt as you wish, and we no longer have access, unless you give it to us, to that tool to see the data that you put in it, which is really important because we don't want to collect this data. This data collection system is for you, okay? The tools we're demonstrating today are linked together, as I'll show them to you, but when you make copies, they will be apart. So another thing that you've been provided with today is a companion user guide for using the toolkit. So you might have a lot of technical questions today. I would invite you to reserve those questions for after you have checked out this user guide, and then send them to me, and Kelly and I will get back to you as soon as we possibly can with responses. We're also generating an FAQ. This is the 2nd round of offering this series, and Kelly used the questions that were posed in the first 3 sessions to really build out this helpful document. So once again, kudos to Kelly for that. But if you have those technical questions, I invite you to check out this user guide. Okay. So we're going to be sharing specific solutions today. We're going to be sharing those solutions in the Balancing LEA Discretion and Flexibility Solutions Tracker. I shared in the chat the link to that tracker. You should have it. The hope is that we will be able to learn from each other. If you've opened it up, you can see that people who have participated in earlier sessions have added their ideas, and we're going to continue to build on that today. The absence of a more face-to-face sort of situation, a more interactive situation, we're going to be relying on this digital chart paper to make sure that you are able to share with each other. In the future, I'm going to be offering follow-up technical assistance sessions throughout the year that are small group sessions that I will offer on a different platform that allow us to have conversations about these ideas and really dig deep into these ideas. So when you complete the survey at the end of the webinar today, please do indicate if you would like to be part of those follow-up sessions. There's a question at the end of the survey that will ask you that. Okay. All right, solution 1, using data to identify barriers to service provision. So I am going to direct you now to the PDF of the sample Google Forms. It looks like this. Can you give me a green check if you see something that has 62 pages and starts with the word summary? Thank you. Appreciate you very much. Okay. So folks who are asking me to annotate, I am not approving annotation right now because it won't just annotate on yours, it'll annotate for the group. Just a heads up there. All right. So, Aussie has drafted. Oh. Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me, please? Thank you. Just one moment. I'm having some technical difficulties here. I want to make sure I provide some support. All right. Can you do me a favor, guys? At the same place you find the green check in the participant box, there is a red X. Can you please click the red X if you cannot see the links that I am sending? Hold on, folks. I'm going to send this one more time. I suspect it has something to do with the timing of entry into the webinar. Just one second. All right. You put up a red X, and now you can see the link. Go ahead and take your red X away. Otherwise, I will follow up with you in the email. Can everybody see the link now? All right, perfect. I will send you a follow-up. If I see your red X is still up, I'll send you a follow-up afterwards. All right, folks? So here we are. So before I open up the tool and show it to you, I just want to share some background with you that's really important for you to hear. So Aussie has drafted a template that you and your LEA can use to bring communication, engagement, progress, and service delivery data into view in one tool. Before I show it to you, I want you to hear 3 important points. The first is that it's your responsibility to work with your LEA to ensure that you're following all data privacy protocols, because this suite of tools is designed to collect and store sensitive student information, and you want to be sure that wherever you put the tool is FERPA compliant. We will be sharing this in Google Drive, but that's only because it's the easiest way to share it. If your LEA has determined that your Google access is FERPA compliant, then you can use it and customize it in Google. But if your LEA does not use Google Drive to share or store information, then you can download the templates and store them in your secure cloud-based application. Furthermore, for larger LEAs that do not use Google, I know you're out there. Our data analysis manager, Kelly, who created these tools with me, has offered to put this into other applications that do comply with larger LEAs requirements. And so it's definitely worth thinking about if you need to sort of encourage leadership to reach out and take advantage of that opportunity. We will rebuild this entire thing in Microsoft OneDrive if that's what we need to do to be helpful. We just need to know that there is a demand for it and it will be used. Second point, this tool is just a sample of what you and your LEA can be doing to use data to make decisions in this challenging time. You're welcome to customize it and use it in whichever way makes sense. Perhaps you don't have a system like this right now, then you could use all of it. Maybe there's just some missing pieces that you'd like to take advantage of. You can do that. Or you can use none of it, review it, see if there's anything you can do to spruce up your existing system. Just remember, once you copy it into your Google Drive or whatever else your LEA has deemed safe to use, OSCE cannot see the data and will not be collecting data via this tool. Which brings me to my final point before we get to all the fun, which is that this tool is not a replacement for SEDS. SEDS is the system of record, and everything you're required to report in SEDS, you're still required to support in SEDS, even if you use this tool to a T. As you'll see, there are redundancies with SEDS. It's up to you and your team to decide which process works best for you. If your team is able to easily navigate SEDS, you may not need all the pieces of the toolkit, but if you want to have everything in one place, it may be worth inputting some of the data elements that you also input to SEDS. That's up to you. Another important note in this regard is that other LEAs will not be able to see what you put in this tool. So you still need to upload information to SEDS that would help receiving schools in the case that a student transfers LEAs. Having said that, one of the first things I'm going to show you is a student summary sheet. And when I show you that sheet, you will see that it is the kind of thing that would be incredibly helpful for sharing when there is a transfer student. Oh dear. Aha. Okay. So, can you please confirm with the chat, just anybody who wants to, that you can do the example of a sample student data tool? Good deal. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. All right. This data tool relies on input from forms. Okay? So, we'll be talking about these forms a little bit later, but the highlight is that these forms are designed to collect information on communication with students and parents, as well as log educator feedback and information from service attempts. The data feeds both into a student dashboard and a summary dashboard, which I'm showing you now. It displays information for all students in a workbook. Like I said, we'll be getting back to input forms a little bit later, so we're going to jump right now into the sample student dashboard, and I'm going to walk through that. I'm going to ask you for just a moment's pause. I'm going to be back with you in about 1 minute. I'm back. Can everyone hear me? Thank you. So we're going to go to a student summary page. I'm going to walk through the dashboard by sharing my screen, and we're going to follow up afterwards with a link for you to copy the tools for yourself and more detailed instructions on how to use them. We're not going to get to all the how-tos in Google today. So we're going to look at the what right now and we'll have the opportunity to really dig into the how with that user guide and by posing follow-up questions. At the top of the page, you'll see some standard student information. I want to remind you that all of this is customizable. The gray fields are the ones that you will have to fill out. The rest of the data can be populated by other data sources in the tool. The next section is a list of all the needs that have been identified by the family, by the student, or by the educator or service provider and have been recorded in input forms that I will show you soon. For example, if a student has said they want help with time management and a parent has said they want help with food security, those two needs would populate here as a reminder whenever you look at the student's needs. This is the sort of thing you would likely just sort of know if you saw the student every day, but should we resume school in a remote context or should we return to school that so many students' needs and situations have changed? We thought it would be helpful to document this up front. Not just helpful, this is in alignment with, I think, the values of the people whose names I see in this participant list. I know many of you from prior professional development sessions, and I know that first and foremost, you want to ensure that your students are safe and they have what they need and that you know that they're safe. So the next thing you will see is engagement information because we don't want families and students falling off the radar. So it reports engagement in instruction as reported by educators and engagement in service delivery as reported by providers. So there is a teacher input form and a service tracker. And both of those things feed into the engagement information so that you're able to mark attendance at synchronous and asynchronous periods, attempts at remote learning or service assignments, and completion of remote learning or service assignments, as well as engagement in service delivery as reported by providers. There's also a place for students to self-report their engagement because they are asked about their engagement in the student input form. Please do me a favor, friends, and if you have attended the IEP Quality Series, can you throw up a green check for me? Thank you. So you will recognize the teacher, parent, and our family and student input forms from that series. They're not exactly the same because circumstances aren't exactly the same, but we aren't asking you to reinvent the wheel. We have just taken things that we already knew were solid practice for working with students and families to make sure that you have a well-rounded IEP, and we're applying that to getting information that we need to serve students in this context, okay? So when we look at the forms, they will look familiar. We keep going down. There's a place where you can put assessment results. This is pretty general because we're not sure what everyone is using to collect assessment data right now, and so you can customize this with whatever remote assessment tools or formal and informal assessments that you are going to be using moving forward with students. This is customizable as well. Those of you who have attended the IEP Quality Series will recognize the handy-dandy IEP Goal Progress Tracker, which we've dropped in. It still makes cool pivot tables to show student progress. And then below, there is a family input and communication tracker, student communication tracker, and educator input and service tracker. So everything populates for the student, okay? On both the student and family input communication logs, if you scroll all the way to the right, there is a place to put action items. So you can keep going over, and there is an action item bar. I can show that to you on the one that's not the sample one. But there is an action item bar. The one that you will copy has that on it. Let's see. So at the beginning of the typical year, there's a whole lot of family and student needs, and we can only imagine this is going to be multiplied this year. would you possibly be able to remember the contents of every phone call or text or Zoom chat, right? And so we've created these input tools that you can use to collect information and record it. So let me go into this input tool really quickly just to give you an example. Okay, I want to start off by saying that this family input form is a lot. There's a lot of questions, there's a lot of content, so I would recommend that at least the initial times that you use this with most family members, you are going to use this as an interview form where you are asking the questions and filling out the tools, and they are providing responses to you so that you're not overwhelming folks. And then you can customize this as you go through it with families as you see fit to make it shorter, to make it quicker, but you don't want to take out anything that's gonna give you any blind spots in terms of family or students' needs. So first, there's just some general information. Some engagement information about parent concerns, about remote learning. However your school year looks, you can tweak this to represent whatever academic context you're going to have. How families are feeling about their special education services, their needs for additional support, questions, concerns, and a meeting request. You will get data for each set that gives you kind of an overview of what families are sharing, but that also populates into a summary dashboard, which I will show you now. There we go. Okay, so can you please confirm with a check that you see the summary dashboard? Okay, good deal. So that's the next part I want to share with you. The idea on this dashboard is to provide highlights and summaries from all the data collected for all the students using the input forms and dashboard on your team. You and your team should decide if and how you want to use these tools. Depending on your context and your existing systems, it may make sense for your whole LEA to use one set of tools so that all of the same input forms are used and all of the data populate on one workbook, or a school or cluster or classroom might be the right grouping size. You can make as many copies of the tool as you want. So each school building could have their own workbook, their own set of forms, so that students at school A aren't appearing in school B's workbook. Again, we can explain more and follow up if you need more assistance to make this happen. But the key is that you should talk with your team about who should be on each summary form and how this data is going to be used. So the first section is a list of students who have identified immediate needs. We don't want, I can see people telling me they cannot give me a check or next, but they can hear and see. Thank you very much for letting me know. I really appreciate that. So we have put immediate needs at the top because we do not want these concerns to fall into the cracks. I will tell you that right now we have physical health and safety, housing, hunger, food insecurity, emotional well-being as our main categories. Should we find ourselves face-to-face in schools, this immediate needs section may be a place for you to keep information related to needs for support to maintain safe physical distancing or proper hygiene, other things that would not be as immediate in nature and if we weren't a pandemic, but become an immediate need in the middle of a pandemic. And so depending on how you are, what school looks like, there are other things that you might add to this list. I would also say that in some areas of the city, communities have been hit harder than others by actual illness from COVID, and so the need to provide emotional supports around that is another thing that may appear there. So Kelly, says when she presents that she loves data, she thinks about it all the time, she thinks spreadsheets are fun, but when you talk about data, especially when we're busy and we have a huge cognitive load and a lot of worries, we can get buried in the details and not to the important things. And so that's why we put immediate needs and contact with families, students, and educators and providers at the very top of the summary dashboard so that if there are concerns, they will be flagged. Kelly has created a little box here, families not contacted in the past 30 days, for you to be able to have a specific call out for folks you need to do more outreach with. Because if you don't have any contact, you have no idea what the answer to these immediate needs questions are. And so you're not sure if people are okay or not, right? So in the context section, there's a count of the contacts, a total count and a count in the last 30 days. The idea is to provide a summary of the contacts based on the forms. And it's important that you monitor that so that you know if you need to do additional outreach. So also, if you are taking this apart and only choosing pieces, if you choose not to use input forms, the Google-based input forms, that data is not going to land here. So it's something, this is one of those situations where if you're not using those forms, you're not going to be able to use this feature of the tool. The next section is engagement data, which is similar to the student dashboard, except it calls out student with zero minutes of attendance or assignment attempts. So this is a window into student well-being if remote learning continues. It will be important to identify quickly students who are not engaging. So similar to above, where you've got a place to look at families you haven't contacted, here we've got a place to call out students who are attending 0% of sessions or service attempts. And because we're OSCE, we have a place for you to look at your timeliness indicators. This is one of those functions that is repetitive of SEDS, and SEDS continues to be the system of record, but we really thought that for some teams there might be value in calling out overdue and upcoming IEPs and eligibilities here as well. If this is something you're really going to launch and use, it would be nice to have like a one-stop shop in that way, and so we went ahead and included it, but again, you do have to use SEDS, but you do not have to use this. Again, this is a sample tool. You can copy it over, use it exactly as it is, customize it, not use it at all. The purpose and idea is to provide you an example of how we can set up a system to reinforce what we all know will be so important in special education right now. Addressing immediate needs, engaging families, students, and educators, tracking engagement, and using data to drive decision-making. Both about academic support and social emotional support. If your team completes these forms thoughtfully and with fidelity, you can imagine there's going to be a lot of information in here to support your decision making, to aid in cooperation among educators and members of the IEP team, and to help families and students get what they need at this difficult time. It is really quite an undertaking, and I just want to, for the 100th time, give a shout out to Kelly, who together we just basically didn't sleep for a couple of weeks and cranked this out. And it's a one-stop shop. We hope that you'll be able to use it. Even if you are not going to use it, we encourage you to think about how you're going to collect this data, because you'll need it not just to serve students, but to think about a receipt of educational benefit and other concerns related to compliance. All right, so that was a lot of talking. I'm going to pause for a second to go back here. Do we have any questions? Oh, I see one. So this will populate from the survey. Do we need to do the families individually? Yes, you will need to do surveys with the families individually. As I said, I would really encourage you to do it as an interview initially, and then you can consider whether or not to appropriate the family for you to send it via email or text. But yes, and it's not something that you just want to do once either. Why is that? Let's see if anybody's going to be brave and put answers in the chat. I'm so not good with these. Where do we find the Google Drive link? Hold on, sorry guys. Okay, I hope you can all see the Google Drive link in the chat box. Okay, more questions coming up. Yeah, circumstances will change, and so you're going to need to use this tool at different intervals. It's just like with a student, when you know that circumstances have changed and you need to take another look at their present levels of performance, right? That's really what we're talking about here. How are we doing right now? What are our circumstances right now? Those of you who have had to listen to me drone on for 24 solid hours about NDREF know that that we're always talking about the student circumstances, and the student circumstances have changed and they will continue to change. And so yes, we're just going to need to ask questions and do this kind of assessment on an ongoing basis. How often do I suggest surveying parents? You know, I think my answer to that would be I would make a decision in my LEA or in my school building about a minimal expectation. Is it going to be at interim and then quarterly? You can be the judge of that, but what I would say is I would reiterate what I was just saying, which is as things shift. So if we're all virtual and we've done this and then we shift to blended, you're going to need to make some tweaks and then relaunch the survey. So when you do that, you're going to get new information about a new set of circumstances. Same as when we start being in the building all of the time again. Okay, so folks are asking where they can find the toolkit and all the different tools. So the way that you find this toolkit is, okay, you see this LEA toolkit? Yeah? Need my green checks. Y'all know I just really, really love face-to-face and miss it so much. This is not my bag, not my bag. But, so when you get in here, there are a lot of links. The first links are to this, like these guidance documents from the federal government and from OSSE. The next set of links is to the actual tools. The sample student data tool and user guide, that takes you there. Mine just opened. Yours will ask you if you want to make a copy. Does that answer the question? Where do you find the toolkit? So it's attached to your invitation. It's also living in this meeting. You have a little panel with documents that I can't see, but you have one. And you can get it there. I'll also send you a follow-up email with all of the stuff attached to it, if that's helpful. Okay, let's see. I did answer the question. That's good. Okay. So I'm going to move forward because we're running low on time. All right. So this is where you want to get that solutions tracker open, where we're coming up with different solutions, but I want to ground our conversation in actual data from parents. This is from way back in May, so I'm not sure how they're feeling right now, but I will share with you that the Parents Together Foundation surveyed like a group of families nationally about their students who receive special education services. And they said back in May that 39% said they weren't receiving any support, 35% said they were doing little or no remote learning, and that's different than the families of non-disabled students who only 17% said they weren't doing any remote learning. 40% said it was going poorly. That's twice as many as families of students with IEPs. and 40% were concerned about their students' mental health. That's twice as many as families and students with IEPs. Parents have some real concerns. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and we can put answers in the in that tracker, which I'll open up in a moment. The first one is going to be thinking about how you can use the data tool to help you ensure that students with IEPs are engaging in learning that supports their goals. So how can you use the information you gather from folks to ensure that folks are engaging in learning that supports their goals? Collecting all sorts of engagement data, how it's going. So that those questions that we ask families, we ask as of students and of teachers. Okay? How can you use the data that you're collecting to engage families productively in considering flexible options for service delivery? So how can the data you get from them tell you how you should be sharing information with parents, how you should be collecting and using information from parents, and how the data you collect can help you make or develop programming that ensures that you have systems for collaborating with families. So those are the questions we're going to think about. We're going to, and then there's another. How can you use this same tool to identify trends in families' levels of access to technology? Because when we look at the PAVE survey from back in May, there was a deep concern not having access to internet and technology, and differed very much by ward. Additionally, 44% of parents that were surveyed listed managing school at home as the most challenging issue they were dealing with during the pandemic. So we're going to go to the chart paper, and we're going to have 5 minutes to be geniuses with our colleagues and to consider, like, this is your elevator speech. Dig around in those questions. You don't have time to solve all the problems or answer all the questions, but if you've got great ideas, use your time. It's 5 minutes I'm going to give you in just a minute to serve the group best. Record your ideas because they're going to fuel your colleagues and inform future support from OSSE. Yes, I'm going to steal your ideas and use them to make trainings to help everyone. Remember, if you want to put multiple lines of text in a row in a Google Sheet, just hit Control-Enter when you get to the end of the line and it gives you another row. I'm going to get in there and show you. Okay, we're in using data to identify barriers to service delivery. The questions that we talked about are across the top. There's just find a box that someone else isn't living in. There are 38 manatees or whatever living in here. But when you come in, you can just type away, and you can make more boxes for yourself at the bottom. So go ahead. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to review what's here, to add your own ideas. Don't worry if somebody's already said it. It doesn't matter. I'll clean it up later. You've got 5 minutes, and I'm looking forward to seeing some new thoughts and ideas. All right, folks. Go ahead and continue what you're typing if you would like. I just want to point out that there were several additions made to this sheet, which I really appreciate, but this is a lot to process today. If you are someone who's going to take a few days to look this over, to sort of annotate, jot your questions down, get back to me with questions, I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate that when you do that, you go back and put some of your great ideas in this tracker, because really this is something that now is shared with many, many people, and many people have this link, and when they're going and trying to problem solve for their recovery planning and planning for how they're going to get the data they need in the coming year, they're going to really appreciate the ideas that you shared. So please do, if you come up with solutions after this conversation, and you think of it, just come back and drop those solutions in here, because it's wonderful for people to have the opportunity to learn from each other. Righty. So, all right. So I'm checking for questions now. Does anybody have any questions about using the data to facilitate family engagement? Anybody have any questions? And we'll go dig around for answers in just a couple of minutes. Okay, I don't see any questions right now, so I'm going to keep it moving. Time is moving. So, solution 2 is less exciting, but also less overwhelming, if that's helpful. It is a very analog form. I'm going to open up and show you. It is a sample service adaptation tracker, and it's exactly as exciting as it sounds, but it is incredibly useful. Once you have the data that you can use to consider student service provision in remote and blended learning contexts, and you understand barriers or to service provision or changes that need to be made, you're going to be better prepared to communicate those barriers to families, and you can use the worksheet to guide a conversation with families and to document IEP team decision-making around service delivery in the remote learning context. The worksheet also provides you with a way to document service refusal. This is what it looks like. So you can tweak this again. You can strip the Aussie off of it and put your own fun graphics, and you can put whatever information at the top that you want, but there's a place for you to guide a conversation. Describe existing services, whether or not they can be delivered remotely, adaptations that are required to deliver them remotely, the remote service that is proposed that may be different based on these adaptations, other options that you considered but chose not to adopt, the decision that the team made, a place to record when you sent your PWN, and a place to document the parent decision. So this is just one piece of information that you can keep. When you decide that the tool is just too amazing and you have to use it, one thing I can tell you is once you've gotten sort of used to all of the things that it does, you can add an additional bell and whistle, which is that you can link this documentation right into the student-specific dashboard so that everything truly is in one place. You can just drop links into the bottom of that sheet, make a little box for that. Very convenient. Any questions about that? If so, for students that have multiple providers, do they use a separate data sheet? So if you are talking about, do you mean the sample service adaptation worksheet, Alexandra? Or are you talking about that data, the big data tool? Okay, the data tool. So if you, there are forms, like Google Forms, I can show you really quickly. There are educator input forms. So depending on the kind of service, so perhaps this is a service that would happen in a place like a resource classroom that's being run remotely, or it's services that are being delivered in a gen ed setting. You may decide that you want to do both this educator input form to get more in-depth information, but there is another form that's really specific to service tracking. In this form, there are directions in the user guide that allow you to make copies of the questions and enter information for up to 10 students at a time. So a service provider could open this up and then keep the service provision records, service minutes, all of these things for 10 students at a time can be entered at once, but it'll still send the data to the specific student. Does that make sense? Give me a check or a smiley face. So different providers would have to fill out these for the students that they're responsible for, but we tried to make it as quick as possible because you can do many students at once. Oh, good. Yes, it makes sense. Good. Glad to hear it. Any other questions about this? Okay. So it seems like a very compliance-focused tool, but I have to tell you that if you use this as a decision-making guide and pull something out like this out in a virtual meeting and you're looking at it and working on it together electronically with some families, that's going to also be a real bridge builder for families because you're really going to be demonstrating for them that they are part of the team. And so I think that is another way that this is valuable. So there is, I'm not going to open it right now because we're running low on time, but there are places for you to think through how you could use this worksheet to support transparent disclosure and documentation of barriers to service delivery, to document parent input, preferences, and service acceptance or refusal, and to make the decision-making process accessible for all members of the team. So when you have a chance to really dig in and look at all of these things, I really recommend you go back through these questions because these are questions that can help guide your thinking about this pretty enormous tool. And I think it's really worth your time to go back and revisit those questions in the sheet. Just one sec. Frozen screen, guys, in 1 second. All right, are we on the accommodations tracker? Can I get a smiley face or something? Thank you. Whew, that was scary, it froze. Okay, so we have another tool that is not one that feeds, not one of the sexy tools that feeds right into the toolkit. It is into the data tool, but it is very useful. And it is something that you should be adapting, modifying, and continually building on as you work with families to adapt accommodations for remote learning environments or blended learning. I mean, even when we start thinking about the increased transitions that students will have, that's going to have an impact on accommodations as well. So I will once again open this up so that you can see it more clearly. It's an accommodation adaptation matrix. There are some reminders about what an accommodation is and is not. This is organized the way that accommodations for PARC are organized by setting, timing, and scheduling, presentation, and response, and described in that way to give people some context. This is a way to build capacity among not just parents, but staff members who are new and may not understand the differences between these accommodations and why we choose or do not choose them. And then there are examples of existing accommodations that were used in brick and mortar settings and possible adaptations for remote learning by setting, timing, and scheduling, presentation, and there are links there to some tools that you can use, and lots of presentation accommodations and response accommodations. Those are really heavy with the links for possible resources. When I tell you that you should be building on this and adapting it as we learn more, it's for a couple of different reasons. Number one, you're going to learn what has been working or not working with your students based on your method of delivery for remote instruction, for example. You're also probably seeing a lot of things landing in your inbox that are describing new resources available for educators. And there are lots of think tanks out there generating things as fast as they can, and some of them are really great. And so you're going to want to comb through that overwhelming amount of edu spam that you're getting and see what's actually worthwhile and add it. Finally, parents are going to be your education partners in a new way, and they may have some great ideas that you did not think of that you can add to your matrix and that you share with all of your staff members so that they are aware of all your special education staff members, so that they're aware of the possibilities. And I think that general educators could also benefit from just thinking this through, just in terms of how they can make their remote classrooms and their very different looking brick and mortar classrooms, if we go to a blended context, more accessible in a universal sense. So something to think about for sure. The list, of course, is not exhaustive. You'll learn more as we go. We all will, I guess. So one more very similar tool is a promising practice research matrix that I actually need to go in and update and add to, and I'm sure you have some things that you would like to add. But this is very similar, and again, something I would share with families because it makes them fold them into the team. They may have things they've been trying at home that they can share with you. And you can really, it's an opening for conversation about the student's needs that is maybe a richer conversation that you're gonna have over a draft IEP. So it's organized by things that you are trying to do. So I want to develop and deliver engaging, accessible remote learning. So there's some links to resources in the center, and then there's some ways you can use it. So it's like a quick description of what those resources do. So there are being engaging and accessible across different classrooms and contexts, how to get better at being an online teacher, and then I have included a training that I did back in March for PCSB on using high leverage practices of instruction, specifically metacognitive and cognitive strategies for students, so that when you are having limited check-in time with them, sort of one-on-one, that you're teaching them things that are going to empower them for when they are learning independently to be more productive and to make more progress. So that's something I would point you to specifically. There is a large section on individualizing supports, and in that section there are many resources links that you might find useful. And there is a section on helping parents families to be instructional partners, and there are resources that you can share with families that can help them to build capacity to partner for instruction or service delivery. Any questions there? I'm checking. See any? So again, how can you use these tools to inform parents of their students' accommodations and services and build their knowledge of alternatives for remote settings. You're accomplishing a lot here, right? You are trying to solve a problem, which is something that you did in the classroom is not going to work at home. You are trying to do your due diligence, right, and making sure that you are making the adaptations that you need to make, but you're also expressing a commitment to partnership with families when you share this with families and you make those decisions together and you try to help them to make informed decisions. I think that goes a long way to having collaborative, reciprocal relationships. Again, consider how you can use parent input to expand or improve these tools. Do you consider after a quarter of instruction, hey, is there anything you're doing at home that you think other people could benefit from? Please share the link here. You can take a Google form and make a place for people to drop a PDF or a link. And then how can using these resources with families make for more authentic and productive collaboration? I'm going to say the quiet part out loud and tell you that right now is the moment when you want to be building positive, productive, authentic, collaborative relationships with families now in the recovery period, not in the post-recovery period. Give me a green check if you understand. Yay, love it. Okay. All right, to the chart paper. I'm going to crack open our chart paper. Wasn't sure if we'd have time, but we have 8 minutes. So I wish we could do more voting here. I wish it was more interactive, not just because, oh, sorry, guys. All right, you see it? Okay, so we're going to go to clearly communicating barriers to families. There's some questions there about using the sample service adaptation worksheet. Please take the next 5 minutes to add your ideas either to this sheet or to the leveraging existing resources sheet. While that's happening, I'm going to drop the survey link into the chat box. I've dropped the survey link into the chat box, and so you've got, well, we've got a total of 6 minutes to drop any ideas into the sheet, to fill out the survey. Please do fill out the survey or at least open it up now so that you have access to it, because it is how I'm going to take attendance and issue PLUs. It looks like this. While folks are working independently to add, hope we get at least 2 or 3 new things. I'll be so excited. While people are doing that, I would invite you to ask questions in the Q&A or in the chat if you have some. All right, folks. I see one additional, let's see, a couple of questions. By default, are we enrolled in the training next Wednesday? No, you had to register for it, but if you email me and you want to do it, I can add you to the invitation for next Wednesday. There's a question about loving the support for communication with families. When does one of these discussions, such as accommodations at home, become an IEP meeting and warrant an IEP amendment? I am going to, Crystal, respond to you in an email, and that's going to go into an FAQ for everyone to read so that everybody can benefit from that. And that'll be part of the big mass follow-up email that's going to go out for everyone who attended. A couple of things I want to mention before we have to say goodbye. I want to remind you that the Google survey is in, it is linked in the chat, and that's how I'm going to monitor attendance and give out PLUs. And also I need to know if you want to participate in future opportunities, and I need to know how I can improve this other than getting a way cooler way to deliver this. But the other thing I want to mention, other than I'm going to see you next Wednesday, I hope, is that we're going to be this fall forming a special education community of practice through OSSI, and we're going to be doing some outreach on that soon. But I just wanted to put on your radar that we are going to be digging deep into how LEAs are using these tools and modified versions of these tools, or tools that they have come up with or procure themselves to answer some of these questions, collect this data, and prepare to address regression and promote recovery for students. And so please keep your ear to the ground. You are now on my spam list, and now that you have come here, so you're going to hear information about this, but we will be reaching out to special education leaders across the city in hopes that there are people that really want to roll up their sleeves and dig into how to make this work. And so if you are one of those people and you really want to make this happen, please do reach out to me by email. And you can find my email here and let me know, because there is going to be an opportunity upcoming. I think that those of you who are excited about this tool would really love to have the opportunity to dig in with your colleagues from across the city. Okay. I hope you'll be able to join me for the whole series. You've got the survey. Please make sure you complete it. Please make sure you come back and add your great ideas into our Google Sheet. I am so grateful for your attendance today. I really wish we had more opportunities to interact. I really hope that we get to spend time together again soon.